konferenci o digitalizaci Česka, která vás přenese ze současnosti do budoucnosti. Digitalizace Česka startuje. Připravit, pozor, teď!
Dobrý den.
Hello, welcome to the next day of our conference CzechSetGo. I'm Tomáš Poucha from Magnoli and I will be guiding you through today's program. Today we are talking about how the world is changing, how new requirements appear related to us, to the world, to our work and other things, and we should go more into depth today on what are the roles, what should change, but at first, let's go back to what we discussed yesterday.
But technology is exactly kind of what we need for people to get those basic skills. They're not going to get them in school anytime soon, but I think that the external pressure will accelerate the change within as well.
If we're not creating, we're not learning. If we are learning properly, we are creating. We're not just repeating.
Business should be the force. It should be the business who should bring this revolution.
Já myslím, že firmy, které nebudou podporovat celoživotní vzdělávání, určitě nebudou dosahovat tak dobrých výsledků, jako by mohly, kdyby to dělali.
Takže to bylo včera, ale dneska toho máme pro vás.
So that was from yesterday, and we have a lot of things ready for you for today as well. At first, we will do a brief recap of what we heard yesterday, so that we can follow on from that. Then we will have the first panel with the guests that are already ready here. We will discuss about the learning society and its future. And after that, our industry captains will discuss on how this will be implemented in the companies. Numerous terms were used. Some of them are new, some of them are maybe not that well defined yet, and you will hear some terms today, such as business citizen, learning society, lifelong learning, or the confirmatic virtual world.
Než se k tomu ale dostaneme, ještě bych rád.
Before we get to that, I would like to thank all the partners.
V prvé řadě je to
whom it wouldn't be possible
v jejich prostorách
to be here
jsme.
today. First of all, it's Deloitte, because it's their premises that we are meeting in. Then we have Neuron,
Česká spořitelna,
Czech
Seznam
Digital,
zprávy,
Škoda, Česká spořitelna, Seznam zprávy, Czech Crunch, Magnoli or Red Button.
V průběhu celé té konference.
During the whole conference, we are focusing on several things that we want to remind you of once again. And it's summarized in our meta-analysis that we prepared together with Deloitte, and that shows us the direction in which things are going. So let's have a look at it.
Abychom vytvořili vzdělávající se
to
společnost.
create a learning society,
Měli bychom si uvědomit celou řadu věcí. A
we need to be aware of several things.
jeden z těch zásadních poznatků je, že se
And one of the crucial items is the fact that we are learning throughout
ale je to
our whole life.
momentech,
Learning is not just about school, but it's also about our activities outside of work or school environment, or when we are getting ready for some work. I will be asking our participants on what is their opinion on how these things are interconnected. And from yesterday, we've learned that more and more technologies are being used, work is becoming more automated, and the progress in this direction is accelerating. A few years ago, we heard that everything can change in one generation, in 20 years. Well, today, this time period is 2 to 5 years. Over this period, everything changes. And in some areas, it's 1 to 1.5 years, like in software or in marketing. When somebody leaves their career for 3 years in these fields, the world will have changed twice in the meantime. And therefore, you need completely new skills compared to the past.
Měkkých dovedností, které se dostaly výrazně víc dopředu, tomu, co bylo před nějakými 5 lety. Dneska je mnohem důležitější vyřešit problém.
Skills that were important in 2015 and that are important in 2020. Today, complex problem solving and critical thinking are ranking on the top places. What could business do about this? Of course, COVID affected everything, and the companies are not ready for that. They are not keeping up with the trend. And these gaps, in fact, slow down development and economic success. What is the situation in the Czech Republic? It's quite sad, I would say. We spend a lot of time at school, but our skills are not that great. And it's almost the hardest in the world to find skilled workforce. There is only 6 countries in the world where it's harder than in the Czech Republic. Not that great in digital skills, and not very well ready for the future. We are ranking approximately in the middle. So we've won some medals in the Olympics, that's true, but we are losing pretty much in this. So change is of course needed, and the figures show that it's not just about doing things slightly different. We need to completely reimagine the things and our approach. And companies will have to deal with this somehow. They will have to change their processes and procedures. They will have to explain to their employees why things are happening. And they will have to allow their employees to focus on the added value and not waste their forces on some repetitive routine tasks that could be done by machines. Today, unfortunately, still more is invested into the hard skill than into the soft human skills. And investments into education and training pays off. When we speak about showing us the money, this is well proven. And innovation is useful everywhere, not just in Tesla or Apple. Innovation brings higher profits, higher market share, faster growth. And in all cases, it makes sense. And very often, it's in the hands of the business and business leaders. The approach of our government is not ideal and is not sustainable in the long term. And the expectation is that the business sector should be the one who will lead the change, because pretty much all the other institutions have become pretty compromised in the recent times. So these are the topics that we will be talking about today, and you can, of course, provide your feedback or challenge us via Slido or other channels.
Nyní se pojďme přesunout k workshopu, respektive výstupům workshopu,
let's move on
to pár dnech.
Discuss the results of the workshops that have been organized over the past few days.
Já si teďka dovolím tady ukázat tohleto schéma, protože kdyby 5 bodů, tak to možná...
These are, let's say, 5 areas in one chart. We are talking about the future of work. That's the main topic. But of course, there are many impacts in that, like everything becoming more virtual. That's number 2. Number 3, it's creativity and art. That means we have to involve people a lot, which leads us to hybrid learning and to the strategy 2030 plus. And this brings us back to our guests that we have seated on purpose on this way. At first they will introduce themselves, and then they will present the opinion of the think stream they were in charge of, what were the results of the debates. And then we will talk about the proposals for the future. If you agree with me, let's start. And I will start by asking you to introduce yourselves. There is one thing that I would like to do while presenting each other. We have formal and informal and non-formal education. One more thing that we did not mention in the meta-analysis is that people with higher education, with university education, they continue in educating themselves. But there is still 40% of them who stop educating themselves, stop learning, they don't do anything. They lead this traditional life of school, work, retirement. People with lower levels of education, the situation is even worse. 80% of them stops learning after school. Well, here, among you, we have, let's say, the best of the best. So I would like to know what are your hobbies that help you in your work in a way, or that give you something that you can use in your work. So first, we have Nina Verson-Murphy.
Celý svůj život měla jsem sen, že budu hrát nějakou hudbu, ale
well, all my life I was dreaming about being a musician, but I never did it. And at the beginning of the pandemics, I bought a piano and I started. And over that year, I learned a lot of songs and I made a small concert for my family and I was really proud. And it was a big win for me. Thank you. And does that somehow reflect in your work?
No, lidem říkám, že prostě by měli užívat ten způsob vzdělání.
I always say to people that they should also use other types of learning. For me, it was a new occasion. I had to create new neural pathways. My brain had to function in a new way. I was a bit afraid of it, but I still went for it. And of course, there were moments when I was angry and not happy, but I worked on that. and I realized that I don't have to be perfect, but by playing, I feel happy, it gives me joy, and I think this applies to any learning. And we will talk later about the future of work. Thanks, Nina.
Další oblasti, což je virtualizace.
We will also talk about another area, which is virtualization. Virtualization is represented here by Eva Pavliková, CEO of CzechSetGo Digital. So what are your hobbies and how do they reflect in your work? Well, I am in the panel of virtualization, but my hobbies are quite physical. I would name two. During the COVID period, I increased my yoga classes online. So my lecturer helped me online, which was great. And I think yoga helps me concentrate on one particular thing. I do yoga, which focuses on stability and intensity of the stability in individual poses. And the second hobby are philosophical literature, original authors. And it helps me realize that sometimes instead of gathering information, it's good to ask questions, even questions that you have no answer to. And I think that this gives me a new perspective also in my work. Thank you very much. Perhaps a technical remark. I can't remember anything. That's why I take notes. So I'm not drawing anything. I'm not doodling here, but I'm just taking down notes. So what about creativity? Who else should talk about creativity than Luboš Malý, Red Button, a long-term innovation director of the Lego Group? Well, I'll pick up when Nina left off, which is music. I like percussion or playing drums, and I think it shows clearly how important it is for your work, because in music you need to practice a lot so that the concert is good, and that's why I think that this is important also in your work, because you need to sharpen your axe so that you can do your job properly. And another thing is, which is good for the drummer, is that you can continue, you can go on even when there is a blackout, when the lights go off. So you can be the support for the rest of the people who sometimes have to have a solo, so for a drummer, this is a good thing that you need to be the support for everyone. Petr Chára. Petr was a guest or a panel guest here yesterday, so he already told us a bit about his hobbies. And Petr Chára is the CEO of Scholastic Consultancy. So Peter, what about you? Well, yesterday I mentioned two things. I mentioned traveling. Perhaps I could tell you how it all started. When I was some 4 to 5 years old, or 3 or 4 years old, I received Atlas of the World. It was during the communist era, and it helped me read. It helped me learn to read, because I wanted to know what the names of the countries, of the flags that I saw in the Atlas were. So I also remembered the capitals, including all the African countries, and it was an atlas from 1966, and was still some of these countries were still colonies. So then it caused problems for me in the school, because I remembered all the old names, not the new ones. But when I had a chance, the first thing I did was I traveled abroad, and that's what I've been doing for the past decades. At first, I just had a backpack and just traveled on my own. Later, I was traveling with my family, and I could say that I traveled around the world several times already. But not only abroad, I also like traveling across our country. And another hobby, which is quite recent, which is not so recent actually, because it goes back to 2014. In 2014, that was the first time when I ran out of my house, so to say, and I became one of the people that I had not understood until then, which was a group of runners, because until then I didn't really understand what the fuss was all about. But during the pandemic, it proved how beautiful and free activity this is. You can do it anytime you want, anywhere you want, and you don't need anything. You can can even run barefoot. You don't even need the sneakers when it comes to it. Even that's not what I do. I actually wear shoes when I go running. But you can do so. You can do so in Manhattan. You can go running in the desert. You can do it anywhere you want. You can get up early in the morning before there's traffic, before it's too hot, and just go running. And you will talk about hybrid education. And the last period, which sums up the strategy 2030, will be represented by Krzysztof Osádka, lecturer and member of the leadership team of Učitel naživo. So, what about your hobbies? You have beautiful hobbies. I was thinking about it a bit and I realized that I like sleeping and eating. So yes, I love sleeping and eating. These are my hobbies. And even during COVID, I realized that when I set my priorities and I think about my priorities, you need to take a holistic approach. Which means that if I have a sleeping deficit and I don't have a full tummy, I will not make good decisions. So my biggest hobbies recently have been to sleep and to eat.
Moc děkuju.
Thank you, great.
Já vím, že tohleto intro vlastně je trošičku jako by se...
I know this intro seems to be a bit off topic. However, one of the conclusions of yesterday's panels were empathy. How important empathy is and how important it is to know your audience. And I think that most people will remember, most people in the audience will remember the hobbies than their presentations. And perhaps it could inspire them as well.
Learning teďka.
It's also a bit of learning.
Abychom se dostali o čem jsme. Máme mluvit.
But to get back to the point, our topic. So let's just briefly go over the individual areas and look at the summaries. Each area will be represented by one of you, and all partners and all. There were 30 partners, and they contributed significantly with their ideas and contributed to these topics. You can see individual points, individual topics, but what are the main conclusions? What are the main messages? I would like to ask you to answer them. So, Nina, you could start. Our group was quite interesting because there were people who work with large companies, small companies. Gary Bors is an author who will represent a new book, Next Rules of Work. We discussed various things, our experience, and we also discussed empathy towards people who work in these companies and how difficult it must be to get over various changes and how important it is to continue growing. And it came down to 3 categories. The first... Okay, we will discuss it later. Okay, just a brief summary now. Okay, thank you, that's it. What about you? Okay, we discussed virtualization, but what I considered really useful was the fact that virtualization, in fact, is about competences and about people. So virtualization is not really about VR technologies or super top-notch technologies and innovations, but about people having access to this virtual environment. So we discussed issues such as inclusion, diversity, because there are people who have no internet connection or they don't have the necessary equipment. So I was quite glad that we did not just discuss the technologies per se, but we also discussed the environment, how important it is to make it inclusive and diverse, and how we could achieve it. This brings me back to what Sarah mentioned yesterday. She talked about the entire world being ready for the change, because everything needs to, all the pieces need to fit together for it to work. Lubos, what about you? Well, our work, our group, as you've mentioned, increased its size. There were only 10 of us, and now there are 30 of us.
Dobře, ano.
And I have 10 points, but perhaps tell me to stop. So, creativity. Sometimes we think that there are creative people, and then there are those who work hard. So, and this is wrong. We want to change this perception. Creative means the new efficient. So when we sometimes talk about creativity, it seems like we're talking about disruption, which is wrong. So that's my first point. The second point is that our group was more diverse than perhaps you would expect. And we also discussed cultural differences because being creative means something else in, for instance, Japan than in the US or in the Czech Republic. And there's also a difference between what creativeness or creativity means for children, for young adults, or for older people. So this was also quite interesting, and we will discuss the details later. And this brings me to my last point. We talked about creating new things, because creativity is about creation. If we want to achieve long-term sustainability of business, lifelong learning is a must. It's a necessity. You need to be able to have a safe space to roll up your sleeves and try something new, even, give it a trial and error approach. So these were the three main conclusions or messages, and I will discuss it later.
Skvěle. Výborně. Díky moc, Petře. Co to tak?
Peter, well, as Nina said, and also the others, the group was very diverse. Martin, Hanka, Marv, all from different fields, let's say. But that was, in fact, a good point. And we discussed a common point. Everyone went to school. That's like a common point for everyone. And everybody knows how school should be done properly. And that's not really the case. So we were discussing in detail about the fact that it's, let's say, quite sad, the result today. In the 21st century, because it's at school where children should learn the skills of lifelong learning so that they can learn throughout their lives. If they don't learn that it's normal to continue learning once you leave school, they will be in the 80% that stop learning anything once they leave school. So let's say the wording was different, but the ideas about how it should look like are quite converging. Krzysztof, Strategy 2030. Last group also was very diverse and very interesting composition. People from the ministry, from the National Teachers Institute and other organizations. And we also discussed things related to school a lot, because lifelong learning is great, but the approach to learning is created at school or during adolescence. You can do much more with a child or with a teenager than with adults when it comes to the habits, let's say, and approach to learning. The Czech Republic has 5,500 basic and high schools, several thousand teachers. It's really big system, let's say, and we need to work on it. Czech kids are looking forward to going to school. In this list, they're on the lowest point, lowest rank in the whole OECD. So, about the strategy, it's great that the strategy exists. It was drafted by highly credible people. The process was legitimate. Focus is good. We have the preparation of teachers, leadership, support for schools, tackling inegalities that really increased during COVID. There is focus on lifelong learning. But we had the 2020 strategy. And in fact, we found out that almost nothing was implemented from the strategy 2020. So the good point is, or the good news is that nothing changes and it's about people. And the bad news is that it's just about the focus, the long-term focus. And business can help in here with that. The representative democracy as the current system is not ideal in, let's say, maintaining focus going in one direction, and this is where business can help. Thank you. Did you just, deal with, let's say, the schooling phase, or did you go further in life, let's say? There were some people speaking about requalification and other points. The strategy is focused mostly on, let's say, school education, and that's why we try to focus on that as well. From the very beginning, we try to explain that education should not be about just adding technology to schools. It requires a lot more. Thank you. So all these things are, in a way, interconnected. So we'll be going through individual areas now. And if anyone has a comment, a question, a proposal, please let us know through Slido. You can see the code on the screen right now. And let us know what you think.
Takže tohle jsou jednotlivé think streamy, které pracovaly. A teďka se
we've presented you briefly the think streams.
Velmi vznešeně. Čeho chceme v principu dosáhnout?
And let's look now at what we want to achieve in each of these areas.
Co to tady je? Zase začíná Nina.
And again, we are starting with Nina. Sorry, world is not kind. In our think stream, we ended up with 3 categories. We need to work on our mindset, on how we are thinking about these issues, on the skill set, on the skills that people have, and we think that the soft skills are the most important. You need to spend time in that, but you don't need to invest too much money. You can develop the soft skills just by, let's say, focusing on your behavior and trying new things at work. And the third category was tool set, how we are teaching things. And if all these things are taken together and you start to focus on not the exact content of your work, but more of the roles that you have to carry out or perform, then things become more easy, and you can realize that the lifelong learning also can take place in the work environment, thanks to relationship with other colleagues and solving of various issues. Well, the approach today is that people is that they think they will start work in a certain role and they will finish in that role as well. And we need to change this mindset. We need to persuade people that they will be able to find new work if they have the right mindset, skill set and tool set.
Řada z vás řekla, že během toho covidu
It's quite interesting that most of you said that during COVID you started to, practice piano or do other things. That was more like realizing that you are here physically, you could step back a bit from the work run. So there's the perception of yourself and of how you change your life, and the leaders have to be the examples of this approach of lifelong learning. They have to explain to others what they are learning at any moment of their life, and it's important in the family context and in the work context. Virtualization. We discussed this topic from various angles and from various points of view. We discussed other things apart from technology, but technology was the main focus. We found out that more important is to experiment with the technology. It's more important than the technology as such. Be ready to try new things, be ready for a failure. We often have the tendency to speak about our successes. If we fail, we only are ready to speak about it once we succeed. But we need to change that. It's okay to say, I failed and I need to know why. And for that, we need the technology experiments. Second point, the role of the business. We need to move from generating profit to generating added value, and that's the responsibility of the business as well. Businesses are accountable, let's say, towards their employees, towards their surroundings, the environment. There's also the families of the employees. And number three, education is equally important to work activities. So when an employee is getting educated, is learning, he is working. He's in fact working for us because he's acquiring new skills that he will be using for us. So education is not just an add-on, it's an important part of work. If something fails, in English you say by failing you're learning. Do we have a similar saying in Czech? Because there are some, general things like you shouldn't lie and you should be polite to older people. I don't know if we have anything like this about learning. Well, it's the stand-up comedies are often based on the failures. We are not ready to say there's a problem and I don't know how to solve it. And this is really important, to have experiments running that we don't know how they will finish. Great. I've heard, well, the idea was good, but the result is as usual. And that brings us to other comments, like, I knew it would end up like this, and there are numerous similar sayings like that.
Ano, to je totiž ta kreativita.
Well, that's the creativity, right? If I can follow on this, I like those people who say, we've already seen this, because sometimes it's true, and it's good to avoid the same mistakes. Our creativity stream, the several points. At the beginning, it's important to enable the experimentation, the trying, and number two, sharing. So we have, let's say, very minimalistic points on the slide, but the discussion, of course, was much larger, much more extensive, let's say. When you speak about enabling, you have to have your own reason why. Without the own why, you won't get anywhere. Maybe there are some obstacles in the company, some barriers that should be eliminated if possible. Natural creativity comes from diversity of opinions. But diversity here is really crucial, which leads us to enabling, and then you need the space for some creative work, whether it's, you know, in your backyard or in such a space as here, it doesn't that matter. And then we come to the doing part. That's when it becomes natural. And when you do something or create something, and in the process you fail a bit, that's also part of the learning, and also asking the right questions is part of the learning. It's not just that we've spent 10,000 and we have no results. Price per learning measurement maybe is not that ideal. Sometimes you have to award people even for trying something. And then the sharing, that's very important. It helps you to find new role models in the company. Somebody who is very dynamic might not be such a hero as someone who will find the right solution and who will share this correct solution. And thus that person can shine stronger. And that brings me to the last point, and that's, let's say, taking responsibility. This is my company. And who is part of the company? Is it only those who have a signed contract with me? Or if we have the schools around and the society, the community around, are we ready to accept proposals from them? For example, through social media, there are lots of occasions for sharing. So just start doing it. Stop talking, start doing it. We had the same in there. Yeah, thank you. Great.
Přesně tak, přesně. Ten business jako tam jako bude muset být, i když teď se vrhneme teda.
Business also plays a crucial role, but let's talk about schools and education a bit. Well, everyone inspires me a little bit, so now everything is mixed together. So one of our messages is less words, more action. Strategy 2030. Christoph mentioned it. Before that, I've been in education for 30 years, and I've been continuously coming up with new reforms. So we've been reforming our education for 30 years, and you saw the numbers, you saw the statistics. Our kids hate going to school, the outputs are not that great. But what happened during the pandemic? Well, lots of things, but there were two major events that took place in the area of education. First of all, we realized that, unfortunately, and my colleagues will not like to hear this, that our staff, when it comes to our lecturers, is still in the 19th century. And if it were not for children, they would probably not even connect online, because up until now they have not thought about it. So this digital competences gap among between children and adults is gigantic. Of course, not everyone, but let's say. Oh, yes, there are. Of course, there are a few good teachers and educators, but not all of them. And what is also important is that everyone who wanted to see what it looked like in schools today could see for themselves, because you just entered your kids' room and you saw the teacher, you saw the classroom, you saw it on the PC screen. And I cannot quantify it, but quite a few people, many people were shocked. Not about what it looks like in their teacher's bedroom, but because they realized that the schools are still the same, like when the parents or even the grandparents were at school. So it was just passive transmission. The child was sitting in front of the screen and just taking notes. We have strategies, we have skills, we have competences, we have businesses. But, you know, the schools, they still have their, you know, good old-fashioned Austrian, Hungarian education system. And of course, we have a few enlightened teachers, but some of them are so enlightened that they actually made the form more important than the method. We said, oh, we did 100% everything online. Okay, but sitting for 8 hours in your kitchen at the table, in front of your PC screen, looking at your teacher, and the top high-tech event for them is to have a presentation online. So just imagine us sitting here, just watching a presentation for 20 minutes, how boring and tiring it would be. And imagine a little kid doing this. I mean, you can't do it like that. So there was absolutely no interaction whatsoever.
My prostě, a já se dostaneme určitě v dalším kolečku do těch střev toho hybridního vzdělávání.
So this brings me back to hybrid education. Hybrid learning is the future. Hybrid learning, combined approach, presence learning as well as distance learning. And if we go back to schools, well, we can go back to schools, but if you just sit there being quiet, being silent, then it's good for nothing. So we need to have projects, we need to have cooperation. We need to learn to collaborate. We also realized that combining individual approaches increases the efficiency because we have various learning styles, and if you can pick what's best for you, someone prefers listening to a lecture, someone else prefers talking about it in a smaller group. So if we have various approaches, it increases the efficiency because everyone can pick for themselves what they prefer. That's how you can learn something new. It's about individual care. That's what we are lacking, yes. I discussed it with Vlada now when we prepared this conference. We've discussed it for months and months. We feel that most schools are killing creativity. That's the fact. And those few who are not doing it, well, I very much appreciate them, but there are not that many of them, unfortunately. Okay, I don't want us to keep on talking about someone doing something or not doing something, because I also talk about I deal with internal communication. I've been a lecturer for quite some time, and I also deal with the issue of internal communication and how you should communicate internally. During the COVID, we have gathered large amount of data and methodologies. So we want to show the teachers how to do it. And I was appalled how diverse opinions I had, how different opinions I had. Some teachers told me, well, my goal is not for the kids to have fun. My goal is to make sure that the kids learn something new. So who's the bad educator here? Who's the bad teacher? Because of course you can. Who is our audience? Well, everyone is doing the best they can in their given the conditions, but the conditions are very bad. That's the problem. Well, we need to realize that everyone must open up for new opportunities and new approaches. That's the point. I mean, we have had strategies in the past, but we've been talking about transformation, about reforms for 30 years. So every teacher who wanted to change their learning style or their teaching style had the chance and could have done so already. They could have attended classes online or obtain new skills and so on. But by simply digitizing education, by digitizing, let's say, the Pythagoras sentence in an interesting way, you can the child can look at it and say, okay, well, now I understand it. But then they realize, well, does it even make sense to go to school if you can actually learn it online? You can socialize during your hobbies, and when it comes to memorizing, or when it comes to learning new things, you can look everything up online. And why even living in the Czech Republic? Let's move to the Mediterranean because I'm on home office anyway. So that's the philosophy behind it.
Moc děkuji. 2030.
Okay, 2030. Strategy 2030. Okay, cars will be flying around. Yes, everything.
Mě to sedí na jeden zajímavý soundbite, který jsme měli včera na tom streamu.
We had a good soundbite yesterday. I think it was Stop the Blame Game. I think John Appleton said so.
Právě to souviselo s tím, co všechno business může dělat.
That was connected to all the things that businesses can do. I basically agree with most of the things that have been said here, but I would like to add some context. Give it some context. So, education is an important institution also in the 21st century with regard to coherence and development of our competences and so on. So public education is definitely important and has its place here. But let's give it the right context. Over the past years that I've been working in this area, I realized that you cannot really achieve much by pointing fingers, by blaming someone. The Czech Republic has had teachers with the worst pay in OECD. On average, 56% of what university graduates earn.
Ta profese v tomto kontextu nemůže
within this context, this profession cannot attract new talents. Allocation of teaching faculties per student is one of the lowest. And what can business do about it? Businesses are in contact with local politicians. They can emphasize demand. Financial commitment. So what can you do to make sure that teachers earn more? We are also lacking professional support. When we talk about in-learning in companies, I don't know how many people you have here, but when we did some research, we realized that a director of a school has 3,000 Czech crowns per one teacher per year. That's the budget for one teacher per 1 year of a director of a school.
School skill creativity je teda vlastně jedna z základních.
Creativity.
Jsou na internetu, kterou
creativity is really important, and it's about investing in new people. For us, the most efficient investment is in the preparation, the primary preparation of teachers, people who are just starting to study teaching faculties or are new teachers. So we need to make sure that the reforms that we have had on paper for the past 30 years are actually being implemented. And we also have to see for ourselves whether something is changing, whether there is an impact left on the children. Leaders sit in meetings with politicians quite often. So how about they put this on their agenda? How about they mention that for our company, it is important to have a highly skilled workforce? I mean, business democracy is stop the blame game, because a politician has, let's say, 4 to 6 years in office, and they don't really have the incentive to think, let's say, 15 years in advance or ahead of themselves. It's not that they are useless or they don't want to change anything, but they don't have the incentive to make long-term changes. And businesses should emphasize what they need, and they should say, okay, businesses need this, and you, as the government, need to provide us with the right conditions, especially when it comes to financial commitments to implement these strategies. So you have the strategy is good, but now you have to implement it. We have to lead by example. And I'm glad that here in Duluth we are doing it, because there's a great difference between what's going on in businesses and what's going on in schools. That's why it's good to have an environment for this conversation. The gap is widening, and it creates a new space for discussion as well, which is a good thing. So business leaders consider e-learning or learning in general as important. And they also participate in various strategies which can have a great impact. Just to add, please don't think that, well, my goal was not to blame anyone or to point fingers, but we have to describe the situation. We have to state the facts clearly. And by kids being taught at home, we could see for ourselves what it looks like. And we have the solutions. We know what needs to be done. But as Krzysztof mentioned, it's not just a coincidence that we're sitting here at Deloitte. Deloitte has many events, many innovative events in this area. And we need businesses to realize that they need to enter education. They shouldn't wait for the government to call for tenders. They should enter education. Deloitte has a great studio here, and if they want to, within just a few months, they can create an educational program in any field they choose. And it will be very interesting. It will be interesting for kids. It will attract new talents. And it's not just Deloitte. Many businesses created such studios, and they can use it for children as well.
One thing we need to fill in this small gap, let's say. You talk about, business-related aspects and items, and that's, let's say, the easiest, because there is always someone listening to such requirements.
Orientace vlády na budoucnost, 58. místo ze 141.
Government orientation at the future, 58th place out of 100 and something. Long-term vision, number 111 out of 140. That's crazy, I would say. Doesn't make any sense. And when we think about it, the first thing that comes to our mind is schools. Does it make sense for us here to, put blame on the schools?
Materiálem, který my máme, samozřejmě my musíme, mě se moc.
Because we need to work with what we have, and business should focus on these topics when negotiating with the public administration. Okay, but is this our role to, replace the state, try to solve the problems that the state should solve? One of the tasks for our Think Stream was what could business leaders do to help implement the strategy 2030? We can't pretend that there is no public administration. The problem is that the public administration is not an adequate partner.
Na všechny účastníky, ať nám hážou, ať jsou interaktivní.
And please, we need more interactivity. We have just one question. And that asks about financial and personal resources of the Ministry of Education for implementation of the strategy. But that's not what we are talking about. We are talking about the business perception of this.
Zkouším porozumět té otázce, je docela...
I'm trying to understand the question. It's a bit complex. I don't know what is the allocation at the ministry for the strategy 2030.
Ze státní správy nebo politiků
je
150 000 věcí.
Public administration and politicians, they have, let's say, thousands of things they have to deal with. And we've heard that business has the highest credibility among the institutions we have. That's a pragmatic approach. Let's say business is functioning, they have funds, so there's quite a strong credibility when negotiating with the state.
Z těch zemí, společností, kde se to podařilo,
in those countries and societies where they succeeded to transform the public education, we know that it lasted some 30 years. If some from the business community are strong enough to, let's say, take such a vision or have such a vision and start implementing it, then I would say they are better placed to do that than people in the ministries and in the public institutions. We are speaking about the future and the need. We sometimes think that we need some template, but you know, we have a diverse world, and the school is no longer able to provide us with a template for everything because the world is too complex. Business leaders say they need diversity in thinking, but the school is trying to shape all the kids in the same way. So we need no longer to improve the system, but let's say to somehow free up the system a bit. Another thing is that the state has its own limits, and we cannot just wait for the state to solve this. We hear that education is in the national interest, it's in the interest of us all. And the state is trying to do something with the education system, and the business should have the same role, and we as individuals should also have the same role. Nobody will do it for us. We have to accept our own responsibility and understand what our role is, and this is a crucial part of lifelong learning. So we need to be aware of the situation, like we have the state, we have the business, we have the NGO sector. These are the partners creating the environment, and we cannot wait that only one of them will solve it. In the past, there were people coming up and saying, okay, fire is a big problem for everyone. And so we will have a, organization of firefighters that will come when there is a problem. But nevertheless, you will still have an extinguisher at home to start, putting out the fire immediately. And, this could be a simile. The state is doing what they can. They have the system, the firefighters system. But every individual has a role as well, like this metaphorical extinguisher. Someone, is offering training on other things, and these are already helping and not blaming the state. But there is still a lot of companies that only wait for the graduates that will come from the schools.
došli. Už to prosím nechme, tohletu věc, ale nechci se tady v tom jako...
Yes, I think this is where I wanted you to get. I didn't want to talk just about the role of the state. And by this I'm not saying that we should not have a dialogue with them, but this is not the topic of our conference. We have the analysis that prove that, you know, it makes sense. But if education or learning is also a hobby, you know, nobody will decide for me whether I should play piano or the guitar. Yes, it's upon each one of us. Thank you.
To je naše aspirace budoucnosti. Bolavé, těžké téma.
That's our aspiration for the future. Now let's get to something that is much simpler or easier, let's say. What do we need to do to get into that future that we've described? Before going into what needs to be done in the individual areas that we've just defined more in detail, so that we don't say that it's just about school. But we have this scheme that we've presented. Maybe if we can see it once again on the screen to see how these things are related and connected. Is there any future? Is there any technology, any people, any skills that are becoming more important? The hybrid learning. According to you, what are the items or points that are extremely crucial for the future? Well, you can see it in the chart or in the slide. It's the cooperation that is above all of them. We should not look at the individual categories separately. It's the interconnectedness that is important. Cooperation of individual people and also curiosity and learning can unleash the potential of any individual to cooperate, to be creative, and to add something to the system, to the group. It makes sense.
Kdykoliv bych se o tom tématu chtěl bavit abstraktně, ta kreativita je ve výsledku.
If I wanted to discuss this in abstract terms, we can speak about creativity as a well-defined process. I mean, same as I'm cleaning my teeth every day, I could spend 3 minutes or 5 minutes every day by trying to be creative, trying to do something. So start to talk in a less abstract way about it and appreciate the first pioneers. And then anytime when, you know, I feel I want to complain, I can go in the opposite direction and praise someone, because in fact time is not exactly money in this case, and if I do something creative, it's also work. And some good example is the teacher life, učitel naživo. Not thousands of teachers, but it's a support for those who need it. Thank you.
Pojďme se teď teda vrátit k těm výstupům. Co jsou teda ty jednotlivé kroky?
Let's go back to the outputs. So what are the individual points that need to be solved in your area? Future of work. We need to invest into education and learning. It's not just about money. It's also about time and space where they can focus on something, where they can concentrate on something. And it's not just about some special training in a new virtual environment, but it's the company approach that they support people in learning
by měl mít 100 hodin každý rok.
A CEO said that each employee should have 100 hours per year that they can spend at any type of learning, training, education, and it doesn't have to be just about the skills you use at work every day. It's about opening new doors for your people. Some people could say, yes, but I don't want to give them time to educate themselves in what they want. But we see that there is a long-term return in this because people see we appreciate them, we invest in talents, and they appreciate it. It's a new approach, new angle of view. And the second thing was about knowledge that we have within a company, and we need to be able to use that. Google or IBM have various global platforms that with courses that people can take and learn something new. They don't have to go to university for that. The ways of learning and teaching are changing, and it's good to help bring the knowledge from the company to the public space.
Co jsou ty kroky v té?
So what are the steps, the right steps in your area? I'll pick up where Nina left off. So the way that we have KPIs in business, why shouldn't we have KPIs also in the area of employees' education? It could be, let's say, 10% of their working time, or let's say a certain amount of hours per year. But it should be what they like. It should be an activity that's close to their heart, that could be also beneficial for their work, and simply something that the employees will enjoy. And I think this should also be one of the goals of enterprises, social responsibility, not only just benefit making, but also responsibility towards their employees, towards the society, towards the environment. And the last area that I would like to emphasize is that we should support employees to also look around themselves, to bring new knowledge, to be part of new communities, to simply look for new communities that give you a new perspective, that give you a new context, and perhaps find new situations in which you can be innovative. But don't just say to your employees, do it. Lead by example. Be the cornerstone in this area. And all these things are basically clear. They make sense. You start doing yoga, and it helps you at work. Why don't managers and executives realize it? That if we ourselves like it, why can't we do it in our companies as well? I think that's the innovation, that's the risk. I think what's important is to simply let go of the tight control over your employees. Simply let them be themselves. And if leaders lead by example, and they talk about learning by going cycling or doing yoga or running, it can help. Learning, that's the key word. Learning, that's what has the right and big value. Thank you.
Já bych teď jenom si ještě jednou projet to, co řekla Eva.
Perhaps I would just emphasize what Eva said.
Přidám k tomu asi ten, by měli něco udělat ke zvýšení.
If employees should do something to increase their creativity,
ten prostor.
and businesses to increase their creativity is to increase the space for it. Of course, you have companies that are nicely systemized, then it should be more chaotic. If, on the other hand, it is too chaotic, then it should be more structured. So simply create new spaces for innovation and creativity. And companies can even meet with other businesses, be it pro bono or on a commercial basis. It doesn't matter. And I can also imagine, I mean, can you imagine going to work and not having a lunch break?
Když by v tom, a teď to pojmu blbě, v časovém fondu
if in your time fund you had your 30 minutes for lunch break, but not every day at the same time, let's say it would be 5 minutes at the beginning of a meeting or at the end of the meeting, or just ask how to do it differently. What else could we try that everyone else has not tried yet? Why don't we approach our meeting today in a different way? So these are things that sometimes pop up in your mind when you're taking a bath, when you're lying in your bath. And so let's just not take ourselves so seriously all the time. Let's take at least 5 minutes each day to be more creative, to not take ourselves so seriously. So let's let's now imagine what we can start doing differently, let's say from next Tuesday. Okay, let's start with KPIs. So KPIs should not be just about deliveries. They should be also about sharing, about wow moments. It sounds so bizarre, but that's the first step on your long journey. And when I hear things like that, you know, it keeps my heart pumping. So that's one of the key things that you should start with, the small things, taking small baby steps, just new habits, and new habits. And KPIs are also good. Everyone knows what KPIs mean. So why not also use them differently? Because that's the language that the employees understand. So why not use it to be more creative as well? Thank you. Thank you very much. I agree. I agree. I agree. I agree with everyone. Just as Nina mentioned, Eva. But for it to happen, we need to have this hybrid learning. That's what we have here. Because through hybrid learning, people will learn new processes, because it will be a combined process. It will be distance as well as present based. If something is cooperative, you can decide whether you want to join or not. It's simply flexible. We need to create a flexible environment, a flexible learning environment. We are the tool, or our group is the tool. Our group talked about the tools that we have at our disposal. And for these tools to be available to everyone, we need to take certain steps, but these steps are easy to make. You can see it on the slides. There's hunger for innovation. Wherever you just go and ask for an innovation course, you might learn something new. And that's what I've been saying for quite some time, and Hanka mentioned it as well yesterday. I mean, there are many people who think the same way. And yesterday, during our meeting, we all agreed on certain things, but now we have to forward it. And if you say, okay, I want to learn how to play the piano, well, let's go to an e-shop, and you can find a course there. You don't have to travel, let's say, half or 40 minutes to a music school. No, you can simply log online and learn something new online, and then you will have time time for your hobbies. You will have time to do yoga, to sleep and eat, to lie in your bath or just do yoga. Crowdsourcing is very important. And the pandemic showed us, I mean, of course, there were some instruction videos in the past as well. Blended learning has been here for dozens of years, but new talents emerged during the pandemic. Many teachers in the Czech Republic as well as abroad started to be, let's say, famous online. There were no-name teachers. Nobody knew them before. But suddenly, you know, teachers started to shoot videos about physics, and now everyone loves it. Many children now love and understand physics because of these videos that some teacher in some forgotten village made and posted online. So new talents emerged. That's why it is important to create content that will be in this innovation hub. And so just we need to have videos with some added value. Innovative videos with added value. Thank you. Okay, so 2030.
Já si jenom uvědomuji, že jsem trochu obrátil ty dvě věci. Tak ta vize pro té našem think streamu
vision in our think stream was in the word continuity. Documents are good, strategies are good, but businesses can play an important role in the strategy 2030 because it will help secure continuity. In the past, we've had several ministers over the past 15 years who were in charge of the Ministry of Education. So we need to make sure that there is continuity preserved, and that's what businesses could do.
Pracovat přímo s tím veřejným sektorem a
we need to work directly with schools, with the private sector and public sector. We need to interconnect these two separate worlds. And we need to do so in a smart way. So building bridges, interconnecting separate worlds, that's important. Also, we need to have a conversation with the government.
Potom, a tohle je docela zajímavé, jsme tam měli i...
That's also important. We also had representatives of various associations present at our panel yesterday, and association is very important. Associations are very important in business because they ask various questions, they have various demands. And when you look at companies such as Deloitte and others, they might have projects and they say we need creativity. And there is also a business community which also strives for more people being in vocational trainings, because we also need these skills and so on. So that's why we have associations to promote various ideas and various interests. So that's quite important. And last but not least,
nestydatě, mně se hrozně líbil ten příklad s hasičema.
I loved the metaphor with the firefighters. So the government wants to make sure that we don't have too many fires here. That's why we have fire squads. That's why people have fire extinguishers at home. But we also have a volunteer firefighters here in the Czech Republic, which is one of the largest non-profit organizations in the Czech Republic, and there are various initiatives that come from the non-government sector, and thanks to them,
extrémně flexibilně vlastně.
We can have a very flexible innovation, which institutions couldn't do on their own, and if so, not to such an extent.
Příklad toho, jak by se mohlo něco.
So they can also be an example of how things can be done.
Být docela silnými partnery
and be a strong partner in what we do. Volunteer firefighters are often those who come put out the fire. And of course, I'm not trying to
tom celém ekosystému, ale já tomu opravdu
To
věřím.
say that we don't have volunteer associations that are also important in the other associations, but I just took the example of firefighters to show you how important this flexibility can be, and also this volunteering. This brings me almost to an end, and I do not want to ask Nina to be first, so that she's not first all the time.
Pojďme si zkusit teďka shrnout každý.
Let's try, or if each of you, please try to sum up the key messages.
Možná Nina na konci řekne, to už.
Perhaps Nina will say at the end, okay, everything has been said here before, but that's you know the advantage of coming class, because you can say so. But in your opinion, what are the take-out messages? What are the key messages?
Pojďme to zkusit a hodit si do hlavy, že to každý má říct jako.
Let's imagine that you have 1 minute to present your take-out message, and imagine that you are presenting it to your grandma. Just 60. Present your take-out message to your grandma in just 60 seconds.
Jestli si to každý trošičku kreativně poupraví.
You can be creative as much as you want.
Tak, prosím. Pojďme, co je shrnutí těch věcí ze všech těch oblastí, které tady dneska zazněly.
Ze všech těch oblastí.
All the key messages from all the areas, not just your area. So what's the future and what can we do about education to achieve it?
Je to těžký. Ale teďka, když si to všichni vezme,
it's hard.
Co si člověk zapamatuje, jo? Jak se říká, že lidé zapomenou.
We often hear that people forget 50 to 60% immediately. Within the next 2 to 3 days, they forget additional 40 to 40% of what is left, and the rest, out of 60%, transforms into something completely else in their head. So let's try to remind them before they forget it.
Dík.
Thanks a lot, huh?
Dobře, tak velmi jednoduše.
To put it simply, technologies are everywhere around us. They are developing more and more. We need to get them to schools. By getting technologies to schools, we will get in more creativity, more resources, thus allowing the people to acquire some skills without just listening to the one teacher, and to acquire the competences, digital competences, competences for learning, citizenship-related competences, which will transform into the citizens' responsibility. So let's have the most possible inputs in schools so that we educate a person that will continue learning. Because from school they will know that learning is a lifelong thing, and when they enter a company, they will be ready to face problems. Thank you. That was the one summary for our great-grandmothers. Another summary for great-grandmother or grandmother?
Stejně jako je důležitá práce, tak je důležitý odpočinek.
Work is very important, but relaxation is equally important. And our grandmothers knew that. And for companies, it should mean that work is as important as education and learning. Otherwise, I would not be able to come up with innovative ideas in the long term. From the company perspective, we can say that kids, when they are born, they are curious, and during their growth, it gets lost somehow, or we kill that. And when they come to companies, we want to revive that again. And the easy solution would be not to kill it in the first place. Let them be curious throughout their whole growing up until adulthood. Thank you.
A babička souhlasí?
Babička to bere. Okay.
Yes, the grandmother agrees. I'm not sure whether I will be talking to my grandmother or any other previous generation, I am here with the pragmatic hat on today for whatever reason. We said that creativity can also be in everyday things, like someone can do a beautiful Excel table, if that's what you need in that moment. What I would say is that any of us can have a look at our organization, be it head of a business company or head of a fisheries pond, and everybody should ask themselves, am I creative enough? What will my people need in 5 years? What will they need to know in 5 years? Am I doing enough for that? And if yes, please spread the good word and present the role models. Thank them, praise them as heroes. And if I'm in a situation where I'm not doing enough, then we've discussed several options how to start. It's not rocket science. Sometimes you feel for some time that maybe you should go in that direction. Then just do it, try it. Be ready to say sorry in a creative way. Don't be afraid to fail. There are people that have sources, budgets higher than some countries. And they should be ready to say, well, I don't know what the result will be, and I want this. And if we won't succeed, then okay, we can accept that. And this type of courage is something that we need, that will help everyone. Thank you. That wasn't exactly a message for my grandmother, because she doesn't know what rocket science is.
Rokicany taky. Ty taky. Tak co myslíte, Krištofe, můžem?
Jo.
Tak prosím.
Tak babi. Babičko.
Christoph, your turn.
Tak se všichni společně potřebujeme hlavně...
So that we can live well together, we all need to learn new things and enjoy that. The world is changing very fast, and therefore this is the most important thing that we can learn now at school, in companies, in families. If we succeed, we can live much better.
Je s tím spousta strachu.
Of course, people are scared because sometimes it's not easy to learn new things. But if we succeed in this, then we can all have a much better life. In our families, in the companies, at schools, and as the whole society. Thanks a lot to you all. I would like to mention a few points now that I don't think should be lost. We've mentioned that the pandemics helped us to try something new to each one of us. And that's the basis behind learning something new, is trying something new. And it works in normal life. Therefore, we should replicate it at work. We need not to be afraid, and we need to be able to appreciate even the mistakes, the failures. Be, let's say, have a human approach and not rely just on the others, as in the firefighters example. It can be a good inspiration for the companies with the KPIs that they have as a way of support. And of course, a summary of the outputs will be available on our channels. Thank you very much to you all. Have a great afternoon and goodbye.
Digitalizace Česka se neobejde bez vaší podpory. Přispějte prosím přes sbírku Česko Digitál libovolnou částkou na projekty, které uspíší inovační a technologický rozmach České republiky. Děkujeme.
Přestože české zdravotnictví úspěšně odstartovalo svou digitalizaci, mezi jeho hlavní úskalí patří rostoucí počet stárnoucích obyvatel a s tím spojené náklady. Zároveň řešíme snižující se počet nebo dostatečný počet zdravotnického personálu. Na druhé straně máme emancipovaného pacienta, který stále více požaduje personalizovanou péči, kvalitnější péči a preventivnější péči. Chce, aby jeho data zdravotní byla sdílena mezi zdravotními subjekty, chce, aby tyto data, nebo má zájem, aby tyto data využívali i komerční subjekty za účelem jeho prevence a sestavení jeho zdravotního plánu. Na naší konferenci budeme řešit, jak podpořit digitalizaci zdravotnictví v Česku a budeme se snažit ukázat vizi e-health v Česku. Těšíme se na vás.
Myslím, že doba, kdy jsme chodili do školy a tím pro nás vzdělávání skončilo, definitivně skončila. Říkáme a mluvíme o tom už poměrně dlouho, ale myslím, že ty poslední 2 roky nám jasně ukázaly, proč je celoživotní vzdělávání důležité. Pro nás lídry je to povinnost, protože naší jednou z klíčových rolí je jít příkladem těm ostatním. A nikdo z nás nemá svoji roli do konce života jasnou a je potřeba skutečně se učit, speciálně v kontextu toho, že svět kolem nás se tak velice rychle mění. No a druhá věc je, že Jan Amos Komenský nám už před mnoha lety řekl ve svém díle Informatorium školy mateřské, že vzdělávání je vlastně rozděleno do 3 oblastí. Je to nauka o sobě, je to nauka o etice a klíčových hodnotách a až potom je to nauka o světě. A já si myslím, že to vzdělávání, tak jak já jsem ho poznala, když jsem byla malá holka, chodila jsem do školy, bylo hodně o tom světě, jak to v tom světě funguje. Ale bylo tam velice málo toho sebepoznání a bylo tam velice málo etiky a určitých hodnotových principů. A k tomu si myslím, že se budeme muset vrátit a zároveň škola je život. Takže už nebudeme chodit do školy, ale budeme se učit celý život.
Celoživotní vzdělávání je vlastně nutností v současné době, protože světová ekonomika i biznesové trendy se mění tak rychle, že s tím, co jsme se naučili v mateřské školce ani na vysoké škole, už nevystačíme. A myslím si, že hlavně je potřeba se učit flexibilitu, protože to prostředí se mění tak rychle a přichází takové šoky a takové výkyvy, že to hlavní, co potřebujeme, je být schopní pracovat s určitou nejistotou a pracovat s tím, že velmi málo je dáno a že budoucnost musíme pouze odhadovat a maximálně se přizpůsobovat tomu, co se právě děje.
Celoživotní vzdělávání já vnímám jako nutnost. Mě se občas přátelé smějí, že vlastně já se celý život vzdělávám a mě to připadá jako samozřejmost. Já myslím, že svět je čím dál tím komplexnější a komplikovanější. A schopnost se v tom vyznat, schopnost zjednodušovat věci je prostě klíčová. A z tohoto titulu se domnívám, že prostě jak pro biznesový život, tam nás to možná napadá, ale je pro soukromý život to je to zásadní schopnost. Když se podíváte, co nás dneska obklopuje, používáme banku pro placení přes mobil. Pokud chceme stáhnout potvrzení očkování, bezinfektnosti, jdeme na portál governmentu. Pokud chceme nějakým způsobem pracovat, učit si jazyky, máme na to videa. Dneska máme dokonce virtuální realitu, která nám umožňuje zprostředkovat klientům, aby se cítili jako na konferenci, ačkoliv sedí ve svých židlích, každý od sebe třeba kilometry. Takže pro mě je potřeba zvládat technologie úplně zásadní, a protože vlastně řada produktů a služeb zastará morálně dřív než technicky, než vlastně fyzicky, životně, tak se ta data potřeba naopak bude zrychlovat.
It's a must. And again, we've seen status quo destroyed and things changed almost overnight over a month. And it has impacted all of us, and it also impacted it changed the demands that the work and the life has towards us. We all of a sudden have to deal with new realities which require new skills, which means learning. And remember, I mean, when we are young, from time we are born till 18, 20, 25 years, we learn, we study, and then we sort of assume that the learning will come on its own, or sometimes we assume we don't have to learn anything new. But we've seen that it's not true. So I really think that long time learning is a must. We have to do it, and we have to consciously spend time doing that.
Z mého pohledu je neustálý rozvoj a vzdělávání nutností a pilířem každé úspěšné společnosti, a pokud se tak neděje, tak společnost jakákoliv ztrácí velmi rychle konkurenceschopnost na trhu a farmaceutický průmysl nevyjímaje. A musím říct, že pracovní trh v České republice se poměrně velmi dynamicky mění a vyvíjí. Zaměstnanci v České republice byli vždy ceněni především a pro svoji vysokou kvalifikaci, zručnost, preciznost, řekl bych i flexibilitu. Nicméně do budoucna bude jednoznačně nutné se zaměřit na, řekněme, nové digitální technologie a další digitální gramotnost, protože v některých oblastech a zdravotnictví a farmacii nevyjímaje trošku zaostáváme za světem, a musím říci, že když se podíváme na několik příkladů z poslední doby, ať už to byla implementace FMD nebo implementace digitálních receptů ve farmacii, tak to nebylo úplně jednoduché a ty emoce napříč společností přicházely. Takže je zde velký prostor pro zlepšení a musím říct, že všichni lídři v jednotlivých oblastech musí udělat maximum pro to, aby se to zlepšilo.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about lifelong learning for a long time. It's been there, but it's never really been in the foreground. And if anything, there's a realization now that we don't have a lifelong time to go at this. We needed to learn very quickly and swiftly, and we all needed to learn and accept mistakes as we did it. The world of work has turned upside down, inside out. Our personal lives, as we educate children at home, and we learn to trust them, and we bring the education process right into the middle of our families while still trying to maintain our families. Health and well-being and mental strength has come to the forefront of all of this, and everyone is now talking about it in whatever sphere. So I think a recognition, I prefer to call it life learning, and recognizing that you're learning about life all of the time, and you really need to be ready to accept constant re-innovation, constant change. And my hope with this is that we continue to learn, and we don't make the mistake of thinking, bring back the old, let's go back to the patterns and the ways that we had before, because yes, we should keep some of the best of those, but we also need to keep the best of what we've achieved in these last couple of years. And I've seen amazing things come out from my teams, from my family, from the businesses that I work with, that I really want to hold on to and keep building.
Digitalizace Česka se neobejde bez vaší podpory. Přispějte prosím přes sbírku Česko Digitál libovolnou částkou na projekty, které uspíší inovační a technologický rozmach České republiky. Děkujeme. vaší podpory. Přispějte prosím přes sbírku Česko Digitál libovolnou částkou na projekty, které uspíší inovační a technologický rozmach České republiky. Děkujeme. Digitalizace Česka se neobejde bez vaší podpory. Přispějte prosím přes sbírku Česko Digitál libovolnou částkou na projekty, které uspíší inovační a technologický rozmach České republiky. Děkujeme. Správnou dobu na správném místě. Konference CzechSetGo tentokrát o digitalizaci státu pokračuje právě teď.
Vítejte na konferenci o digitalizaci Česka, která vás přenese ze současnosti do budoucnosti. Digitalizace Česka startuje. Připravit, pozor, teď!
Dobré odpoledne. Vítáme vás.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the final panel of CzechSetGo. We will be discussing the role of business community in education, how the business community can help in this area. And I'm really happy to be able to present you top of the top experts from various companies. If, of course, you have any feedback, comments, questions, proposals, ideas, please send us these through Slido, and we will ask and answer them throughout the panel. And I have one extra thing. What is for you the biggest obstacle that you've seen in supporting education from your superiors, from your boss? And then there might be a vox populi that would be sending it back. So that's, let's say, the plan for this session. We will be talking about two main topics: how the business relates to all areas within the educational sphere, not just schools as such. We will talk about lifelong learning, which is kind of a red line running through the whole meeting that we have. And I would like to see a bit of a personal approach here. We are all humans, and I would like to know what are your hobbies and how this reflects in your work. So it's something a bit more personal than, let's say, your education, but it should serve as an example of what learning is and how it works in one's life. So we will start with the lady on my right, Andrea Ferancová-Bartoňová from Espira Investments. So, your hobby, and how does this fit in with your work? And after that, maybe your, let's say, general point of view on education.
Tak mám začít tím koníčkom.
Should I start by the hobby?
Tak ja musím povedať, že teraz práve behom tej covidovej doby som si vytvorila takého nového koníčka.
During the COVID period, I have a new hobby now, and it's really something that I like. I'm very extrovert, and I need communicating with people. So it was very difficult for me during the lockdown. And I started going regularly to the Stromovka Park for a jog or just for a walk with AirPods, and either I'm listening to interesting audiobooks or I'm on the phone with some interesting people. And I continue in that. If I have, for example, 5 or 6 calls to make, I would go out and make the phone calls from outside, which is really, you know, kind of recharging me, because I'm in contact with those people, I'm working, and at the same time I'm doing something for my health. As for my approach to education, it's an area that is very interesting, according to me. And there are 2 reasons for that. Number 1, we are investing into companies in Czech Republic and Slovakia, and we want to support them in their growth so that they can expand outside of the Czech and Slovak territory. The people need to have a business soul. They have to be courageous, and the educational system in our zone, geographic zone, is not very focused on that. So we are looking for companies that invest into education. Just a technical note, I'm not, making any small drawings, I'm just taking notes. Next, Petr Dvořák CEO of Vodafone. Well, I had to think about a bit, and I will put sports aside because that's traditional. And I will talk about one hobby that is a good example in education, that's choir singing. Choir singing. I started with that randomly because it was an interesting story. I came into an environment where, you know, I don't know anything. I don't know how to read the notes. I don't play any musical instrument. I never sang. So being a manager and a leader, and suddenly you are just part of the choir, and you are just, you know, one nameless item. You have to listen to the orders of the conductor. And so it's quite a high level of discomfort. I've never felt such a high level of discomfort anywhere. And your point of view regarding education? I think it's a lot about discomfort. Humanity is lazy and is looking for the easy ways, for the shortcuts. And learning is the ability to get into situations that are not comfortable for us, moving from what I know to what I don't know, which sometimes it's not that nice. So it's not about improving in what I know already, but getting better in those areas that are not so interesting for me. We discussed with Andrea yesterday that when it's two women in the management, it can completely change the mood. And we have Diana here. Diana Roger. Well, my hobbies change. I also was learning how to sing, but I'm really into sports. I need to get out of the technology world, and I need to get out of the people, away from the people. I'm really an introvert person, even though nobody, you know, believes me. So sport, that's something that really helps me, that recharges me. Education. When I started managing Deloitte, my vision was to prepare myself, my people, and our clients for the future. And you cannot do this without education, without learning. You cannot function as a consultancy company if you don't learn new things. So it was a pragmatic thing, in fact. Well, people sometimes say, yeah, okay, that's obvious, you didn't have any other choice. Do you think it's true elsewhere? I don't know whether it's true everywhere. What's important is that it's true for me and my team. Roman Stupka, partner and co-founder of Scale Up Impact. So your hobbies and what do you think about education? My biggest hobby is lifelong learning. I have books everywhere. My Kindle is full of books. I have access to various learning applications, and I'm really into this. In the past, I was, you know, giving out my advice to everyone for free, and everybody hated me because I knew everything. And today, people pay me for that. So I'm trying to use what I read in the companies. And my second big hobby is my grandson of 3 years. It's a great teacher for me. At the same time, I have to be a good role model for him. And because my grandson lives in the Netherlands, I started to learn Dutch. And also we have the technologies that we use, which helps me to realize their importance and everyday life. So I have a lot of hobbies and I'm the smartest one in the world. And the education, I think it's a really necessary condition. It's absolutely needed because the world is going so fast. The young generation is living in that. And if companies don't invest in education and training, it's the beginning of the end. Mr. Baťa, the 20s and 30s of the previous century, they had a school in the company. For 3 years they were training the new employees, and this shows how education is important for companies, and that's true until today. Scott Marlowe, representing Česká spořitelna, the HR department. Hobby?
Můj poslední oblíbený koníček jsou lodě.
Probably the last on the list is boats, and I don't have one.
Já jsem považován za poměrně starý člověk, jako kde měl začít jako s loďma.
Considered a bit too old to start with boats, because most of the people they are in this environment since birth, let's say. So I'm really a stranger among these people. And I really like it because there's lots of new to learn. I'm really motivated. I'm also quite an introvert person, like Diana. And if in Europe you want to enjoy being at sea on your own, it's not exactly easy, but it's possible on a boat. But you need to be able to control the boat in a safe way, because of course you want to come back always to the port, and that's never 100% guaranteed. So that's the last hobby that's kind of taking my time now. You have to learn a lot about the weather, about the depth at sea. And we say about our company Česká spořitelna is 200 years old, but if it wants to survive and be here after another 200 years, it must learn. And even though we think that we've seen everything in banking and there is no space for changes, that's not true. Definitely there is lots of space and we cannot lag behind.
Last but not least, Chief HR Officer.
Tomáš Křesťan, Chief HR Officer, Zásilkovna and Paketa Group. Your
co se týče mých koníčků, tak já jsem
Hobbies.
už před koronou pořídil děti.
Well, I had kids
vlastně tím, že mám dvě malé, tak
before Corona started. I have two small kids now, so I'm learning to negotiate, I'm learning to be calm, I'm learning to be a role model. So that's my hobby of the last 3 years. And then another thing is that I bought a motorbike because I'm also an introvert person. And now I'm learning how to ride without a sat-nav because I don't know where I will end and how I will come back. And my approach to education, I originally am a teacher, and I even had the chance to really teach a few subjects. On the formal education level, I would say in the Czech Republic we are quite well placed, but then there is the non-formal education that should happen in the companies. Once people start their jobs, when they leave school, it's different than what they learned in school, and there is always new things they need to learn every day. So education is a never-ending process, and it must be approached as such. Thank you. Thank you. These were your initial inputs, initial comments.
Tedy jaká je z vaší osobní zkušenosti ta největší překážka.
The question is, what is the biggest obstacle to education from the side of your superior, your boss? How did they prevent your learning? And let's also see some other points or some other opinions on this.
Tak důležité pro úspěch jednotlivců firm, tak je potřeba, aby vedoucí a lídři to podporovali, protože ne všem se do toho třeba chce. I firmám je potřeba připomínat, že je potřeba do celoživotního vzdělávání věnovat finanční prostředky a vlastně úsilí lidí. A je to klíčová věc pro udržitelný rozvoj jak jedinců, tak i firm.
Lídři, naše role je jít příkladem a být dobře orientován v tom dnešním světě, který se tak velice rychle mění.
Celkově podpora vzdělávání a celoživotního vzdělávání nevyjímaje umožňuje lídrům budovat agilní prostředí a zvyšovat také inovativní myšlení v rámci svých týmů. Určitě to zvyšuje v rámci týmu efektivitu těch jednotlivých týmů a je to takový, řekněme, katalyzátor, který umožňuje další růst společnosti a konkurenceschopnost na tom jednotlivém trhu. A samozřejmě mít zaměstnance, kteří chtějí a jim umožněno se vzdělávat, jednoznačně zvyšuje konkurenceschopnost dané organizace na trhu.
Skvěle, takže to byly pohledy manažerů z jejich kanceláří.
So, these were the inputs from managers from their offices. But let's get back here. Let's come back here. So, we all talked about your learning, your education. You all mentioned you like change. When something moves you forward, when you have to step out of your comfort zone, so to say. You have to invest something, and it brings you some parallel or analogy that you can work with. In the previous panel, we talked about lifelong learning. But let's look at the world as such. We all agree it's important. We need funding, we need to have the right strategies. But what obstacles we have to overcome? And let's give specific examples. Let's not talk in general. Let's not talk about beautiful ideals but let's talk specifically about what we can do. So, what, in your opinion, are the main obstacles or barriers? And now I'm not talking in general. I'm talking about specific obstacles, specific barriers. You are from the top management of very important companies. You talk to other stakeholders, other managers, your counterparts. So, what do you talk about? So what are the key messages? Well, education and learning is always about moving the entire society forward and teaching it something new. Today, we talked about teaching our customers use our application and move from their, let's say, default setting that they've been used to for years, so this one type of communication, one type of work, and move towards a new type of communication. So that's one specific example an issue that we had to address today. And when we meet with other business people, we often complain that people do not want to learn new things. They do not want to develop their skills. But luckily, over the last 2 years, many people who were offline went online. So, in my opinion, that is one of the biggest benefits of the past 2 years and the biggest obstacle that was here and that we managed to overcome. So, Scott, what do you think? I think it's quite clear. So what we value in our companies are the short-term goals, the goals that we set. And to put it quite simply. Our short-term goals are our priorities. If in large corporations you prioritize your you have to prioritize because there are many priorities. And what we hear from our employees is that it's very difficult to find time. So we tend to prioritize time. And employees tend to tell us that they don't have the time for further learning. And if they do, they feel like we won't value their increased or their new skills. So we need to make sure that the value system in our companies is in line with the drive that we have for lifelong learning and education. Just like Scott said, mindset is the key. If an employee thinks that personal development is something that he or she needs to do because the employer wants it, then it's a problem. But if they feel like they want to do it because they will increase their competitiveness on the job market, they will look for opportunities to do it. Still, this is theory, but I also talk from practice. And when I talk to my 20-year-old son, he's working in a tech company, and we talk about what competencies he needs to gain in order to move forward. Because he received a £30 higher offer, and he said, "I don't want it because I would go back. I wouldn't learn anything new." So he refused this offer of a new job because he wouldn't learn anything new. So that's the right mindset. But if you have a boss who's not helping you to increase your skills, to learn new things, then what are you doing there? You're on the wrong train. I'll continue. When we look at the obstacles, I think the biggest obstacle is the leadership. Quite often we talk about it's about people, not about us, the leaders. We expect a change elsewhere, not in us. And I think that the biggest obstacle is in the leadership because it doesn't provide the necessary space to, make mistakes, to learn by doing, to try, try new things and perhaps make mistakes. People need to stop being afraid. Everyone wants to do something that they like, and if you give them the room for that, then in the end, I think they will be more satisfied. They will do something that they like. And apart from mindset, communication is also very important because we as leaders often start our communication with numbers, with statistics. But most employees, they don't really know if you tell them revenue 100 billion. They don't even know, is it enough? Is it not enough? So don't start your conversations with numbers, with statistics. You need to change the culture, your corporate culture, because then it helps you engage others as well. Thank you. Okay. Yes, I definitely agree with what Diana mentioned. But it's also about me, myself, because if I, as an employee, want to increase my skills, want to learn something new, then I won't let my boss to stop me. That's true. You're right. I think the cornerstone is your willingness to take a risk, because you will always have a dip when you won't be as successful, as efficient. Perhaps you will have a dip in your KPIs, and you're learning something new now. Perhaps you're learning Dutch, so now you're not speaking English, but in the near future you will have a new skill. So perhaps now there's something that you're not doing, but at the same time you're learning something new. You're investing in your future. I listened to the previous panel, and someone mentioned that lifelong learning needs to be taught to our children, needs to start at a young age. But if you ask whether a boss threw obstacles in front of me to prevent me from lifelong learning, I think it's important to look at how companies approach lifelong learning, because my first and only boss, because then I was on my own, was Alex Angel. And he was an angel, truly. And Alex allowed me to take courses. My first training was Smile When You Dial. And until today, when I'm on a phone with someone, I smile. And then he sent me to a training at Oxford for 2 weeks. And I wasn't at the company for even a year. It was quite interesting. I was looking forward to it. And since then, I continued on this lifelong learning path. So companies can engage young people and change their mindset towards lifelong learning if they want to. Thank you. Great. So people do not want to develop. We should engage them more. So corporations or companies, they prioritize short-term goals and KPIs and companies also prioritize numbers, statistics. So let's discuss it further. It sounds interesting. Okay, we are here only once, we live only once, so let's enjoy it. But then we have the numbers. So what would help us? Or can we do without numbers at all? Probably not. Can we, just leave all those numbers behind? Learning is a necessity, so let's forget about numbers for now. Is it possible? I don't think that numbers are a bad thing, that we have to do without numbers at all. It's about scorecards. The current scorecards simply are outdated. We are used to be looking in the rear mirror and expect the things ahead of us, and we are afraid often of predictions, of the predictive matrices. Because we are afraid that these predictions are predictions of our future success. And it's not just about one company starting doing something completely different, but the problem is that many large companies are publicly traded companies. And so there are quite a few companies that need to change their mindset. I don't think that it's about KPIs and budgets, because that's where usually companies stop and say, we don't have the budget for that. So that's not where it should end. That's where it should start. People and employees should feel like they need to develop. They need to increase their skill sets. They need to learn something new, obtain new capabilities. And perhaps this brings me back to Batya. I need to look at my skill set or at my skill gap and try to fill it for my own employees. I need to attract new talents or attract new people by providing new trainings. For instance, we have training for girls, Code Like a Girl, for young girls, 16 or 17 years old, to even think about the idea of studying IT. So it's not our investment into our own people, but it's our investment in the society to change the mindset, to teach girls that they can also be programmers if they want to. So perhaps a few years later they will be working for us as skilled programmers. It's a lot about the methodology. Okay, you have the classic approach. You send the people to a training, they come back, and 2 weeks later they remember nothing. So you need to have the right methodology, you need to have a feedback, you need to share it within your team. And if you have this, then budget is not the main problem. The main problem is to have the time and the willingness to do it. So if you have an enlightened boss who is willing to engage people in lifelong learning, and to teach them to apply in practice what they've learned in theory, then they will be more enthusiastic about lifelong learning, and it will also be more cost efficient. So sometimes we demonize numbers, and of course I understand the KPIs are important and are the key, especially for companies that are traded and stock exchanges, but it should not be the main thing. Well, I don't think it's about people who want to or do not want to develop and learn something new. But the problem is that sometimes people I don't think that people don't want to develop. Perhaps they don't want to learn something that they don't like, that they are bored with. But if someone is likes coding, they will be excited about the training. But if someone doesn't like coding, then why should they take a coding class if they don't like it? It shows that we have to look at what people like and realize that it's always cheaper to train your own people than to hire new ones and train new ones. Because the people that have the possibility to learn something new, they stay in the company longer.
Já mám na vás totiž jednu otázku trošičku.
Perhaps I've read an analysis recently which talks about the main obstacle to progress. It's not the top management. Basically, you all agree that it makes sense. We have the funds, sometimes it's not even that much funded, but who's not afraid of progress are the young people, the young, enthusiastic, courageous people. And sometimes we hear there's no such thing as lack of courage, there's just lack of information. But then there's middle management. The middle management, because based on polls and surveys, that's the main problem. So perhaps the middle management is the main obstacle. So how to change the mindset of the middle management? Because you have the people at the bottom, you have the top management, but what about the people in the middle? So what do you think? I can only talk from my own experience. So how did we persuade the middle management? Well, by leading by example. So we started educating ourselves, we started improving our own skill sets, and then, of course, you have to change some people. If there is a person who is slowing everyone behind, then why should you keep such a person? So yes, for me, we have a vision, we have a strategy also in the area of lifelong learning. We're trying to learn from one another. That's the biggest asset. If you can turn to your colleague and ask how they do it, and if someone is not willing to share with their colleagues, even though they have the time, they have the possibility, then you should simply hire someone new. Sometimes you need to make radical changes.
Thanks a lot. Let's hear more opinions and then we will continue in the discussion.
Domnívám se, že dojde ke dvěma zásadním problémům. Za prvé ztráta konkurenceschopnosti a za druhé ztráta efektivity, výrazně nižší produktivity práce. Právě z důvodu toho, že pokud nedoženeme a nevyrovnáme, ideálně nepředženeme ten vlak, ve kterém už jedeme a který se nám vzdaluje, a to je skutečně masivní nástup umělé inteligence a obecně technologií do našich životů a jejich výrazné zrychlení, tak se to zásadně projeví jak na schopnosti české společnosti konkurovat, a nejenom těm vyspělým západním společnostem, ale i těm, které dnes nazýváme rozvojovými zeměmi, které právě s covidem masivním způsobem investují právě do digitálních technologií. Ale rovněž nebudeme schopni konkurovat v té produktivitě, což je naprosto zásadní věc.
Já myslím, že firmy, které nebudou podporovat celoživotní vzdělávání, určitě nebudou dosahovat tak dobrých výsledků, jako by mohly, kdyby to dělali.
Všechny společnosti a organizace dlouhodobě řeší jednu zásadní věc, a to je dlouhodobá a možná i krátkodobá motivace zaměstnanců. A je dlouhodobě potvrzeno a je poměrně jako jasné, že ke zvyšování motivace zaměstnanců neslouží jen dostatečné mzdové ohodnocení, ale i další benefity, a které se skládají z možnosti nějakého profesního růstu a případně možnosti právě se vzdělávat. A ve chvíli, kdy některá z těch složek v té motivaci chybí a dlouhodobě je nedostatečně podporována, tak samozřejmě ty zaměstnanci nejsou motivováni a v některých případech jsou frustrováni a v neposlední řadě opouštějí společnost, což samozřejmě nikdo z těch lídrů si nepřeje a zvyšuje to samozřejmě náklady a opět to snižuje konkurenceschopnost na tom trhu. Takže to je jeden z důvodů, proč bychom se měli věnovat vzdělávání v organizaci.
To byly názory dalších manažerů.
We've heard some more opinions on that. And let's try to move the topic a bit forward. The next question is, how and why should companies be involved in the functioning of the whole society? Why should they care beyond their, let's say, building? Why should they go further out? And coming back to the obstacles from the boss, like I'm getting better than the boss, or if they don't provide enough support, they're afraid that a competition is growing for them. It's about priorities, how to organize various types of activities, because education is just one of them.
Spíš jako abychom ho jako tohleto jako už poslali k dalšímu dojednání někdy do budoucna. Je tady nějaká oblast, která vám fakt jako rezonuje?
Is there any of these areas that resonates with you?
Původní otázce, jako co myslím, že je trošku nefér.
Going back to the original question, I think it's a bit unfair to blame the middle management by saying it's them who stop the progress.
Co se po nich chceme?
I think we need to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, do we exactly know what we want from them?
Od svých středních manažerů je výchova.
Because not many companies would have on their list of tasks for the middle management as number one, educating new talents. It will be on that list, but probably not as number one. So I don't think we should throw them under the bus just like that.
Kdo k nám psal, je to o té prioritizaci.
And I agree, it's about setting priorities and it's about courage. Be ready to present something to others and be looking a bit more forward.
Máme požadavky z oddělení, kteří seniory.
We have, when hiring people, individual departments tell us we only need senior staff who know everything, but people are not available on the market, and we say let's hire junior staff, and the answer from the departments is no, not possible. I think the companies need to focus on educating their own talents, but we need to discuss with the middle management and tell them, okay, I understand you might be afraid someone new will come and over time they will be better and kick you out of your job, but maybe we will move them to another department then. It's about giving the people the opportunity to develop. Thank you.
Že my tady většinou máme jako lidi, kteří už jsou dost daleko.
There is a disadvantage in these panels,
ne každý.
And that is that we have usually quite, progressive people that are advanced in their roles. So you are not probably a very representative sample, I would say. But you confirm that these points, these topics are something that needs to be addressed. When preparing this conference, we came across the term business citizenship. Business citizen. We've
To není CSR, to není společenství.
Discussed it, and a lot of people said that's about CSR, but it's not about corporate social responsibility. Corporate social responsibility is when a company is aware they do something wrong and they are trying to make it better. So that in the general balance they are on zero or slightly positive. Business citizenship is one step forward. It's about being aware of the fact that we need to go beyond our company. We've heard that we are number 133 in the world when it comes to finding the right skilled talent. Even Uganda is ahead of us. And I don't have anything against Uganda, but still, you know. So how do you perceive this business citizenship concept? And do you think it makes sense? And why? The company, corporation, that ugly word, the business, should they have an overlap into the community? When I tried to write some articles in the past, it was a lot about the civil society, about the community, and it was very, very trendy. Now we are one step further.
Tato téma je prostě jako teraz.
This is a great topic and really interesting for me. And Erica Henderson, Reimagining Capitalism, the book is very, you know, speaking in this regard. Because who else than the companies should take the responsibility and change the world so that they can survive? Because we would probably die waiting for the governments to do something. And the companies, they basically don't have any other choice because there are no people on the market, and it's more efficient for the companies to train people in-house. In America, when they are training people at the tills, they found out that the employees then are very loyal and they stay with the company for a long time. And here we are speaking about people with elementary education. And the company, in fact, outsourced, let's say, the task to some universities. And they are helping the people to create a better future and to get more education when they have the capacity. And I think that's one of the roles of the business. Like, improve the education system in general. Let's not wait for the state to do something. There are a lot of companies that have values above $1 billion, and they should have the money to invest in improving the environment. My point of view is maybe again slightly different. Business citizenship is about taking and giving back. If my company is successful, it means I've earned it from the society, I've taken from them. And each one of us is able to share some life experience with others. Anyone can educate others. And my people are often asking about how they can help, what they can do in addition to the money. If our IT people, you know, go and organize some course outside of work, it means that my employee is happy and also they learn something because they have to understand how to explain the coding to others. And that's a new skill. So business citizenship for me is a balance of taking or receiving and giving back. That's what it means for me.
corporate societal responsibility.
Corporate social responsibility maybe should be renamed to corporate societal responsibility. I think the company should be responsible also for the environment where it exists, taking care of the surrounding environment, for example, building a kindergarten and, helping the community. And we have three aspects. Educating inside the company, educating the customers, for example, in our case, IT training for senior citizens. It was very important to explain to senior citizens how the technology works so that they can be in contact with their relatives, and also training at the point of entry so that we are not 150 years behind everyone else. And I think this is where the companies could act. Similarly, as Diana already said, we are trying to spread our knowledge. For example, our people can go and make some lectures in schools or organize some programs there that will offer the students new skills that the society will need. And I like the name of the book, Reimagining Capitalism, because it would allow the companies to adjust the environment for themselves. And I think the, let's say, purely manufacturing companies understand this better. They see they don't have the workers, so they cooperate with the schools. They train already the young people who are at school. And we don't have similarly the same approach in the more service-oriented business. And I think we need to set up a better cooperation with the schools. For example, we have a cooperation with the technical university, but we could, expand a bit wider and help the schools and the school system to focus more on the future skills.
V rámci sdružení Red Button vlastně říkáme, že my pomáháme Československu tím, že učíme.
Often say we help Czechoslovakia to by educating our people in our companies.
Krátkodobě, dlouhodobě vidění toho světa.
Sometimes we tend to see just the short-term goals. But let's go back to Baťa, who built not only the factory, but he built the entire city of Zlín. He built a hospital. He built housing. He was a capitalist who was doing the best for its workers, because he knew that when his workers were satisfied, it had a multiplying effect, and it attracted new people as well, and it transformed into more success. So this is very important, and this is a very good example.
Já jenom navážu na to zadání těm školám. Já si nedokážu představit jako teďka firma.
I cannot imagine that a company wouldn't have a strategy for 5 years, because all companies need to have a strategy. But what would you tell a school? We need e-commerce specialists, but we don't have a school that would be teaching or specializing in this side of business. But given how quickly the world is changing, it's very difficult to set the right priorities in our school system, because our school system is not flexible. It has a long-term priorities. It has strategies that have been planned years ago. So it needs to be more flexible to change with the changing priorities. So it's not about, okay, we need to have 1,000 new carpenters, so give us this, or mechanics, so give us 1,000 mechanics, or mechanical engineering and so on. That's not the most important thing. When I looked at some of the skills that are now prioritized, such as critical thinking, this is something that doesn't exist in our education, including our university education. And this is something that we could help our school system to change. Because, well, you said we don't know what will happen in 5 years. So this could be a good project. Teach the children or teach the students to be able to work with our lack of knowledge, with our uncertainty about the future. Because perhaps we still ask the old questions and want to hear new answers. That might be the problem. Yes, again, this brings me back to the mindset. We need to change our mindset because when you're studying high school, we often hear once you have a high school leaving diploma, for many people, that's it. They feel like, okay, I have the certificate now, I don't have to learn anything new. And now the life starts. But that's wrong. That's the wrong mindset. Well, I do not want to defend the Czech education system because I know it has its problems. But again, when it comes to skill sets, especially in the IT sector, they change every 12 to 18 months. So we cannot expect universities to be able to plan for this. So that's the role for businesses. That's where the businesses should step in, because we create the future. We create it, and we should be able to predict. We should be able to tell the universities what we will need in 5 years. So I think because since we're the one, we need to be able to create the forecasts and help them create the right mindsets. That's the role for us.
To, co ty firmy teda mohou dělat. Jo?
So what can the businesses do?
Možná teda, když vás chytnu za slovo, co vy můžete dělat?
Or what can you do?
Zaznělo, že to má jít ze zhora. Jak tady to je?
Because we've heard it should be a top-down approach. So how do you perceive your role? I don't know. Well, you're right that we are able to predict, to create forecasts. And, I know that the old-fashioned approach of simply memorizing facts, it's not the best one, because children need to be able to be courageous, to even have the courage to make a mistake. But at the same time, I think that schools should be able to find the strong sides of every child and develop it. Because I don't want my child to be taught something that some company needs, even though the child doesn't like it. I think that every child should find their strong strengths and weaknesses and develop the strengths. Do what they like. But we need to have courageous people who are not afraid of making a mistake, who are not afraid of speaking up, of coming up with a new idea, because this idea could be the beginning of a great new project. But perhaps in 5 or 10 years we might not need new programmers, but we will need new professions. So in schools it's about communication. Because 20 years from now, who knows what professions we will need. So we need to promote enthusiasm in children so that they do what they like. We need to have a student who likes study, who likes learning or further developing in the area that they like. But perhaps this is not a problem of a school or schools or the school systems. But when we look beyond Prague to more traditional environments, also given the aging of our society, perhaps we should not focus so much on the inputs.
Jak studovali při covidu a co všechno si osvojili za nový dovednosti.
So we can see that children are quite flexible actually, how they were able to adapt to new learning conditions during COVID. But let's look at the 40-plus population, which suddenly started to stagnate because high school certificate or university degree was the end of learning for them. And what about their motivation? They feel like, okay, I'm 40. Why should I learn a language? Why should I learn language? I'm 40 already. I know what I need to learn. So there are not that many people who are willing to take the risk because, well, they usually have what they need. they've paid their mortgage, they have a car. So they've achieved everything they wanted to achieve. Now they are 50, and what do they do now? So they need to have the courage to learn something new. What about the next 20 years? Because given the public debt, we might be working until we are 70. So they should start. They should have the courage to start a new career. They should be able to look at e-commerce because that's probably the future. And, this is probably the area that companies should focus on. So maybe not. They shouldn't focus so much on young kids, but on the 40 plus generation. Because the start is important, but it just needs to continue and not stop or end with a high school certificate or a university diploma. When we look at us as the more successful companies, we need to be able to define our priorities, the skills that we expect, that we want. Is it a critical thinking? Then let's name it. Let's say it out loud. And if we define our priorities, then it is up to us to create the right opportunities. Opportunities also for the people who are 40 plus and feel like, okay, well, maybe, okay, I have what I need, but still, you know, I don't have that much money left, and I don't feel like if I changed my career, it wouldn't disrupt everything. And the more comfortable you are, the more afraid you are of losing it, of losing your comfort. So we, as large companies, we have the luxury of creating new opportunities for people to learn.
Já myslím, že první fáze
I think that we need to lose the mentality that lifelong learning is a benefit. It's a necessity. It's not a benefit, it's a necessity. It's a must. And if corporations consider lifelong learning their priorities, they need to be visible. It needs to show. It needs to be activity that is supported. It needs to be clear that the management is leading by an example. It's motivating its people to continue their learning. And companies who do just this, they have better results. So, if you want to change something in your company, you need to start by yourself. You need to lead by example. If you want your employees to learn something new, you need to appreciate them for them. You need to you need to show them how much you cherish it. So, if you want your corporate environment to change, you need to start at the top, at the very top. So I think that this is the fundamental thing. I like what Roman just said, and I'm an idealist too. And I feel like the more companies do this, the larger effect it will have. It will have a snowball effect. So I think that it's about the snowball effect. The more companies do it, the more attractive they will be, the more people will want it. So I really like what you've just said. I also like what you do. You provide lifelong learning in Czech, because I know that some SMEs, they need to continue their learning, but they have to deal with customers, with cash flow. Their hands are full, so they don't have the time for that. But if companies like yours give them the opportunity to learn something new, I think that they will be glad to take this opportunity. So I think the process is already happening, but perhaps it could be somewhat faster. Okay, you're taking a shower every day. You have 5 minutes in your shower. You're driving to work, you have 15 minutes in your car. So you always have the time. It's just about where you focus your mind.
But you also need the supply side so that such companies are created so that it's easier for them. Because the people from the top management, they often go to the best courses in the world. That's very interesting. But the majority doesn't have time and money for such courses. So the high quality education should be accessible in the easiest possible way. 1% inspiration, 99% execution. We are slowly moving towards a conclusion now. And in a way, I'm not happy because I was hoping for a bit of a conflict here. But you've all basically agreed on everything. But it makes sense because all these things basically make sense. I originally am not from Prague, and that's a good thing because it gives me a certain distance, you know, to things. And to me, things like going for a walk and hugging trees, that's, you know, very simple and very obvious. Why doesn't everybody do it? And similarly, you, during the COVID times, you realized some things because things were functioning in a different way. So, what should we do now? Okay, it makes sense. It's not just like a benefit like food tickets. It can be interesting for the people. It must be visible. We need the snowball effect. So, how do we launch the ball then? And also, I would like to also hear some commitments that will only be seen by a few thousand people that are listening to, that are watching us now. So, what can we do to kick it off? Tomáš.
Za sebe a za naší společnost, tak my se snažíme rozvíjet.
Me and my company, what we do is try to develop not only our employees, but also our partners. And there is some 30,000 of them across Europe. And we want to support them and develop them, not only in the context of our own business, but also to help them progress in their businesses and change their environment when it comes to use of technology. Spořitelna has an internal commitment to develop our employees, our customers, and the broader society, the broader community. How exactly we will be doing it is still under discussion, but we are really thinking about it a lot, and the most pressing commitment is with regard to our company, how to change our organization of 10,000 people into a learning organization that focuses on learning every day. That's the commitment on which we are working right now.
Takže vlastně koho posunu, v čem ten můj program bude lepší. Ale já začínám sám.
Business can help in this, but I think it's really important to start with yourself. I would even a few times a week make a list of what I've learned new and what I'm planning for the next few days. And that, you know, teaches me to stick to the important things, really listen to what my wife said, really do this 30 minutes of Dutch per day, and slowly it's becoming habits, and then I can focus on other things. Peter, well, we've already cancelled the meal tickets, the vouchers. We have a commitment on the three fronts, let's say ourselves, our customers. Ourselves means reskilling, learning new things, and hybrid functioning that will require a lot of new skills from us. And also one of the commitments is help in educating the young, help them in gaining new experiences. We are investing into companies that focus on education. And it's not just education of kids, but also IT education, in-house education in companies, trainings. So the whole range of educational activities from childhood to the very adulthood. And we are ready to help such companies to grow. Diana, on purpose, I left you as the last one, and we will together sum up the conference in a while. It's a bit difficult for you because Deloitte, in fact, already started these activities with this event. We need to create more communities. A lot of us are doing great things, but if we are together, maybe there can be some synergic effect. So create communities that will help. That's my ambition of my personal and of Deloitte that I'm representing here.
Moc děkuju a vrhneme se na závěrečné shrnutí.
Thank you, and now we will do the final conclusion.
Máme za sebou dvoudenní konferenci, v rámci které...
This is the end of a conference that lasted over 2 days. We've had many interesting inputs. We had keynote speakers from all over the world who spoke about the importance of education and learning. I hope we've dispelled many myths such as learning equals school and others. We've presented many arguments why business should be involved in education and learning. And we also had the industry captains here with us who confirmed that all of this makes sense. Diana, my question to you. What was, let's say, the most important, or what are you taking away from these 2 days? I always take notes, and that means I know new things. So what new or additional do you know now, Diana? I was also taking a lot of notes during the panels and the discussions because I really appreciate being educated by everyone. I think for Deloitte this is, an enrichment because now we know what others are doing. And I hope the same is true for you others as well. And it's not just about the future of education, but also about the future of work, as my colleagues here mentioned. So we need to be able to help each other and create an environment that would be similar to what Tomáš Baťa was doing in the last century. Thank you. A few, let's say, half technical comments at the end. This topic will not stop with the cameras stopping. We would like to follow on numerous of those topics by podcasts and in other forms, maybe some working groups. They never stop. They want to continue. That's why I would like to ask the audience as well, if you have any areas you're interested in or some proposals that you would like to share, please contact us and get involved, because it won't get done on its own. We will need to do something about it. Those of you who have registered to the conference, you will receive the magazine the rest of you, you can register now. There is a lot of information on the web, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and I hope we will meet in the future while discussing some of the related topics. And the world is small, Czech Republic is even smaller, so it's clear we will meet again. But we can contribute to that by some active involvement. And this could not have been organized without Deloitte and Neuron, Česko Digital, Škoda, Česká spořitelna, Seznam Zprávy, Czech Crunch, Magnoli CZ and Red Button. Thanks a lot to your support. A huge thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to the audience for listening to us, and I hope to seeing you again at some other occasion. Goodbye.
Druhá konference ze série CzechSetGo je za námi. Děkujeme, že jste byli s námi. A teď se již můžete těšit na třetí ze série konferencí, tentokrát na téma e-health, digitalizace zdravotnictví. Podíváme se na to, jakou digitální disrupci znamenala pandemie COVID. Dále kromě hlavních témat se chceme zaměřit na pacienta, který je středobodem zdravotnictví, chce péči kvalitnější, personifikovanou, prediktivnější, chce, aby se využívala jeho zdravotní data mezi jednotlivými subjekty zdravotního systému a je připraven je sdílet i s komerčními subjekty. Přivítáme zde zástupce lékařů, zdravotnických zařízení, zástupce různých komerčních subjektů a zástupce pacientských organizací. Pokusíme se pomoci nastartovat digitalizaci českého zdravotnictví a podívat se na vizi e-health v České republice. Těšíme se na vás.
Thank you.